Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
There are moments in life when everything feels heavier, like the air itself turns against you, and tonight was one of those nights for me. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring down at the blinking microwave as it spun a frozen Salisbury steak dinner around and around, humming its cheap electric song, while my phone buzzed on the counter like a trapped wasp. I already knew what it was before I even picked it up. My sister, Janine, never missed a chance to twist the knife a little deeper. The message was short, almost surgically cruel, stripped of any unnecessary words like a courtroom verdict. Failures don't belong at the table. That was it. No sorry, no maybe next time, no hope you're doing okay. Just a cold, hard wall slammed right into my chest. I stood there for a minute, microwave beeping in the background like some idiot alarm, holding that phone in my hand, feeling the words dig into my skin. 43 years old, and somehow, after all the bullshit I had been through, this one stung the worst. Not because I didn't expect it, not because I still thought they loved me, but because deep down, against all logic and reason, part of me still hoped. Part of me still pictured pulling into my brother Mike's long driveway, seeing the kids running around the yard with sparklers, my mom waving me over with that big grin that used to feel like home. Part of me still stupidly imagined there was a seat saved for me at that long oak table, same as there always used to be when we were younger and dumber, and everything felt like it might just work out. Instead, I yanked open the microwave door, grabbed the hot plastic tray with my bare hand like an idiot, cursed under my breath, and dropped it on the counter with a slap. The steak looked like a hockey puck swimming in brown water, and the mashed potatoes had the weird crusty film they always got after too much time under fluorescent lights. Perfect. Nothing says rock bottom like a sad little dinner eaten alone while your family throws a party without you. I carried my pathetic meal over to the scratched-up kitchen table and sat down, flipping through my phone, and there they all were, Mike, Janine, Aunt Carol, even Cousin Ricky who nobody really liked but still somehow made the guest list. Photos everywhere, kids with frosting on their noses, clinking glasses full of sangria, those stupid matching family t-shirts they always insisted on making. Big bold letters across every chest, Family First 2025. Yeah, unless you were a failure, I guess. Then it was family first, except you. I scrolled and scrolled, each photo like a slap, each laughing face another little reminder that whatever bridge I had left with them had burned, crumbled, and sunk into the river a long time ago. And damn if I didn't feel it right in my ribs, right behind my eyes, that old tight feeling that says, maybe they're right about you. Maybe you really are the screw-up they think you are. Maybe you deserve the empty chair. I stabbed a fork into the mashed potatoes, let them wobble a bit on the plastic tray, feeling too tired and too hurt to even muster up a decent appetite. The TV was off, the lights were dim, and the whole house felt like it was leaning in on me, waiting to see if I would finally crack and cry like some soap opera sad sack. But instead of crying, I laughed. A short, bitter bark of a laugh that echoed off the walls like something ugly escaping my mouth. Because really, what else was there to do? After everything, after losing the job, the divorce that had gutted me, the half-assed businesses that had bled me dry, after all of that, I was sitting here eating glorified cardboard while the people who were supposed to be my safety net popped champagne corks without a second thought. And here's the kicker, they thought they were right. They believed it down to their bones. In their minds, my failures were proof that I deserved less. That life, that family, that love, those weren't unconditional things anymore. They were prizes you had to earn, and I had come up short. So I did what any pissed off, lonely man with nothing left to lose would do. I grabbed my phone, turned on the selfie camera, and just started talking. No script, no plan, just me and the rawness, and the empty chair across from me. Hey, world, I said, voice cracking a little more than I wanted it to. Guess what? My family told me failures don't belong at the table. So here I am, enjoying a 5-star microwave meal, living the dream. I panned the camera to the sad little tray, the sagging potatoes, the empty seat. Hope y'all are living your best lives tonight. I could have stopped there. I probably should have stopped there. But something meaner, something hotter, something that had been festering for way too long bubbled up and refused to be buried. So I started telling a story. A stupid story, really, about an invention I once tried to make back in college, a gadget so ridiculous it had become a running joke in the family. The Walker Whisk, a hand-powered egg beater that looked like a medieval torture device. They had laughed me out of the room when I showed it to them 20 years ago. I laughed too back then. But tonight I leaned into it. I told the story with big, dramatic hand motions, fake pitches to imaginary investors, ridiculous catchphrases like, beat your eggs like a boss, and whip it real good. It was stupid and cheesy and half sarcastic, and God help me, it felt good. After 5 minutes, I hit upload, tossed the phone onto the couch, and cracked open a warm beer from the fridge. I wasn't expecting anything. Maybe a few pity likes from old high school buddies who remembered the Walker Whisk disaster. Maybe a couple of sarcastic comments from random strangers. Mostly, I just wanted to feel less invisible for 5 goddamn minutes. As the beer went down rough and the night settled heavier around me, I thought about deleting the video. It felt stupid now, small and pathetic. Like a kid throwing a tantrum because he didn't get invited to the cool kid's birthday party. But I didn't delete it. Maybe because I was too tired. Maybe because some tiny sliver of me wanted the world to see the chair, the dinner, the way it all felt. Maybe because, deep down, I still believed someone out there might understand. I turned off the lights, left the empty tray on the table, and went to bed without brushing my teeth. The house creaked and moaned around me, and somewhere outside, a dog barked once into the night. I didn't know it yet, but tomorrow morning, the world would know my name. And my family? They wouldn't be able to text me fast enough. It's funny how fast life can pivot from golden boy to family embarrassment, how in just a handful of wrong turns you can find yourself standing on the outside of a house you once called home, staring through windows that don't open for you anymore. When I was a kid, Tom Walker was the one everyone bragged about at church picnics and high school reunions. I was the straight-A student, the kid with a Letterman jacket and a full scholarship, the one who made our broke, blue-collar family look like it had something shiny to be proud of. I still remember the way my dad's chest would puff out when he introduced me to his buddies down at McMurphy's bar, slapping a heavy hand on my back and saying, "This here's my boy, Tom, smartest damn kid in the county." Those were the good years, or at least, they felt good through the rose-colored glasses of a kid who hadn't learned yet how fast people's love can curdle when you stop being useful to them. It started slow, the way rot usually does. My first real job after college was at a mid-sized tech company, some startup promising stock options and free lunches, the kind of place you think is gonna set you up for life when you're 23 and dumb enough to believe in LinkedIn dreams. I worked hard, stayed late, skipped weekends, and after 4 years, they folded like a cheap card table when the market dipped. I was laid off with 2 weeks severance and a cheery email about exciting new opportunities that never came. I tried to pivot, God knows I tried. Started my own web design company with a buddy from college, ran it out of my apartment, told everyone at Christmas that we were building something big. The truth was, we were barely scraping by, selling logos to desperate local businesses and praying the rent check would clear. Still, I kept my chin up, because that's what walkers do. We fight, we hustle, we never let them see us bleed. But bleeding is exactly what I was doing, and the cuts kept getting deeper. When my buddy bailed to take a real job in another state, I was left holding a pile of unpaid invoices and a lease I couldn't afford. I tried to freelance, told myself it was temporary, but the economy had other plans. Every month was a little tighter, every call home a little more strained. Mom would ask how things were going, and I'd say good while staring at an empty fridge and dodging calls from the electric company. The real blow came 2 years later when I married Jenna, a woman who, in hindsight, loved the idea of me more than the messy, scared reality. We were going to build a life together, or so I thought, but when the money dried up, So did the love. Arguments turned into cold wars turned into slammed doors, and before I knew it, she was gone, taking the dog, the couch, and what was left of my self-respect with her. Divorce isn't just about splitting assets. Sometimes it splits your damn soul in half, and I didn't have much left to begin with. I stopped answering family group chats, stopped going to birthdays and cookouts, because every time I showed up it felt like walking into a courtroom where everyone had already decided I was guilty. Guilty of failing, guilty of falling, guilty of not living up to the polished, easy version of me they used to hold up like a trophy. It wasn't like they said it outright, not at first. No, the Walkers are masters of the passive-aggressive art form, sculptors of silence and side-eyes. My brother Mike would make little jokes about how some of us actually pay our bills. My cousin Sarah would talk about her new house in front of me like I was an invisible ghost who couldn't possibly understand the concept of stability. Even my mom, bless her heart, started ending phone calls with tight little sighs and half-hearted prayers that I would find my way back soon. The invitations started thinning out after that. At first, it was subtle, a cookout accidentally scheduled when I had to work, a family trip planned without bothering to ask if I could afford a ticket. Then it got clearer. One Thanksgiving, I showed up with a bottle of cheap wine and a forced smile, only to find that there wasn't a seat set for me at the table. Someone scrambled to grab a folding chair from the garage, plunked it at the end like an afterthought, and I ate my turkey 2 feet away from the conversation, smiling like it didn't gut me. That was the first real crack, the first time I let myself wonder if maybe love in this family wasn't unconditional after all. Maybe it was earned, like good credit, and I was defaulting. After that, I started saying no to invitations, stopped reaching out, started letting birthdays and anniversaries slip by unnoticed. It hurt, but it hurt a little less than standing in a room full of people pretending not to be disappointed in you. I told myself I was better off without them, told myself real family doesn't keep score, but loneliness has a way of making liars out of all of us. There were nights I would sit up in bed, scrolling through old photos, back when we were kids piled in the back of Dad's pickup truck, when life was simple and we thought it would always be that way. It was around my 40th birthday when the real message started sinking in, not spoken aloud but loud enough to hear in every silence. You don't belong anymore. You're not one of us. You had your shot, and you blew it. Still, there was always the small, stubborn part of me that thought maybe, if I could just turn it around, they'd welcome me back with open arms. If I could just land the right job, hit the right payday, bring home some shiny trophy they could brag about again, maybe they'd save me a seat at the table. Maybe love was still waiting for me, just beyond the next big win. I didn't realize yet that some kinds of damage can't be undone, no matter how much you earn or prove or beg. I didn't realize yet that sometimes the people you think you're fighting for aren't even watching the fight. And on that night, sitting alone with a rubbery TV dinner and a bruised heart, all those years of quiet rejection boiled down to a single text message. Failures don't belong at the table. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a tombstone, marking the grave of every last hope I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The house was too quiet, the kind of heavy quiet that makes you feel like even the walls are waiting for you to say something, and it was under that weight that I moved around my small kitchen, setting out the sad excuse for a meal with the kind of slow, mechanical motions that come when your heart has packed up and gone somewhere else. The microwave tray sat in the center of my old kitchen table, steam half-heartedly rising from the mashed potatoes like it was trying, bless its heart, to look appetizing. I placed a single fork next to it, no napkin, no glass of wine, just the essentials for a man who had nowhere better to be. The light overhead buzzed faintly, a flickering cheap bulb that somehow felt like the perfect audience for the evening's performance, and I sank into the chair like I had been carrying a boulder on my back all day. I picked up my phone almost out of habit, thumbing it to life, and instantly regretted it as the screen lit up with pictures that seemed brighter, happier, and crueler than anything I could conjure in my own reality. There they were, Mike with his smug, Sunburned smile, Janine holding a wine glass up like she was starring in a damn commercial for family bliss. The kids smeared in chocolate cake, everyone gathered under string lights in Aunt Carol's backyard, toasting to another year of family first. I could almost hear the shrieks of laughter, the clink of glasses, the lazy country music playing from Uncle Dave's battered old radio. They looked so happy, so complete, and the empty chair across from me seemed to yawn wider in its emptiness. I clicked through photo after photo, each one another small hammer blow to the chest, each one reminding me that no matter how many second chances I gave them in my head, in reality, I was as welcome there as a wasp at a picnic. The thing about loneliness is that it isn't just about being alone. It's about feeling forgotten, about realizing that the people you once thought would fight for you are the same people who didn't even think twice about leaving you behind. I sat there for a long time, longer than I meant to, the cold potatoes congealing into something that barely resembled food, my thumb mindlessly scrolling, my chest tightening with something halfway between rage and heartbreak. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I did something stupid. I opened the camera on my phone, flipped it around to selfie mode, and hit record. Have you ever felt like you were shut out by the very people who were supposed to stand by you? I asked, my voice scratchy, worn thin by the night. I'd love to hear in the comments, what did you do? The words tumbled out, rough and raw, and once I started, it was like a dam broke. I pointed the camera at the sad little dinner tray, the empty chair, the scuffed table that had seen better days. I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I was going to start shouting and never stop. You know, I said, shifting the phone back to my face, there was a time when I thought I was gonna invent something that would make me rich, make my family proud, hell, maybe even change the world. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like the story was written up there somewhere. I called it the Walker Whisk. It was supposed to revolutionize egg beating, hand-powered, energy-efficient, environmentally friendly. It looked like a medieval weapon, broke after 3 uses, and damn near sent my cousin Ricky to the emergency room. I could almost hear my family laughing again, just like they did 20 years ago, slapping their knees and wiping tears from their eyes, telling the story at every barbecue like it was the funniest damn thing that ever happened. I let that memory sit there between us, the invisible audience and me, let it fill the space until it hurt a little less. Yeah, I said finally with a half-smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, some dreams die loud and messy. I set the phone down on the table, still recording, and let the camera catch me as I picked at my food, letting the silence say what words couldn't. When the timer hit 5 minutes, I stopped the recording. For a second, I just sat there, the video saved to my phone, a little glowing rectangle of my worst night captured forever. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, pretend it never happened, bury the evidence before anyone could see how far I'd fallen. But another part of me, the stubborn part, the part that still burned even after all the humiliations and disappointments, told me to post it. What was there left to lose anyway? My dignity was already shot, my pride already trampled, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there would understand. So I opened the app, tapped upload, and watched as the little blue bar crept across the screen. It felt like sending a bottle out into the ocean with a desperate note inside, knowing full well it would probably just sink without a ripple. I shoved the phone face down on the table, grabbed the now cold beer from the fridge, and sat back down, feeling the weight of the night settle even heavier around my shoulders. I didn't expect anything to come from it. Hell, I didn't even know why I did it. Maybe it was just to prove to myself that I wasn't invisible, that my pain was real and raw and worthy of being witnessed, even if it was just by strangers. As the hours dragged by and the house grew colder, I drifted into a fitful sleep on the couch, the TV still dark, the beer untouched, the empty chair at the table staring at me like an accusation. And somewhere in the dark, buried beneath all the sadness and anger and broken dreams, a small ember sparked to life, too tiny to notice yet, but strong enough to change everything. When I finally drifted off that night, sometime after the second warm beer and sometime before the house swallowed me whole, The video was just another desperate shot into the void, just another sad man rambling into the darkness, with no one left to listen. I did not expect anything from it, not even a pity comment or a handful of hollow likes from acquaintances too polite to ignore it completely, and when I collapsed onto the worn-out couch, the only thing I really hoped for was a few hours of dreamless, heavy sleep. The night clung to me like a second skin, thick and suffocating, but somehow, morning still managed to crack through, sharp and merciless as always. The pale sunlight was already bleeding through the broken blinds when my phone started vibrating against the coffee table with an urgency that felt completely foreign in my new normal of quiet, empty days. At first, I ignored it, rolling over and pulling a throw pillow over my head, thinking it was just another spam call or maybe some overdue bill collector trying to squeeze blood from a stone. But the buzzing didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, more insistent, like the world was reaching through the damn table to grab me by the collar and yank me upright. I groaned, sat up, wiped the sleep from my eyes with the heel of my palm, and grabbed the phone. The screen was lit up like a goddamn Christmas tree, notifications stacked one after another, pouring down the screen so fast I could barely keep up. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, maybe a glitch, some weird internet fluke, but then I saw the app icon flashing, the same one where I had uploaded that stupid, broken-hearted video of my cold dinner and my colder memories. Tentatively, I opened it, bracing myself for the kind of second-hand embarrassment that comes from realizing you had made a fool of yourself in front of the whole damn world. Except that wasn't what I found. The video was blowing up. Not in the sad way where people mock you until you're a meme for 2 days before being forgotten, but in the other way, the rare, impossible way where something raw and real hits a nerve and people start piling on not with cruelty, but with love. The comments were flying faster than I could read them. Man, this hit me right in the gut. You're not alone. This dude is hilarious and heartbreaking at the same time. Someone sign him to a comedy special, damn. My family cut me off too, brother. Stay strong. There were shares, hundreds of them, and each one seemed to spark a dozen more. Old friends from high school who hadn't spoken to me in decades were tagging me, reposting it with captions like Tom, always had something special, proud of you, man. People I had never met were calling me brilliant, authentic, funny as hell, the next big thing. I sat there, blinking stupidly at the screen, trying to process what the hell was happening. A guy pours his guts out over a microwave dinner and suddenly the internet decides he's worth listening to? It didn't make any sense. It didn't feel real. And yet, the numbers didn't lie, the likes, the comments, the shares were stacking up by the second, a digital avalanche that threatened to bury me under its sheer weight. I threw on a t-shirt, stumbled into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of bitter, burnt coffee from yesterday's pot, and just stared at my phone like it might explode. I couldn't stop refreshing, couldn't stop scrolling, heart hammering in my chest with a mixture of fear and something dangerously close to hope. Within an hour, it wasn't just random users anymore. A podcast host with a huge following left a comment, telling me to check my DMs. A small but respectable news outlet messaged me asking if they could use my clip in a story they were doing about family estrangement during the holidays. Someone even tagged a major late-night show's account, joking that I should be their next guest. I laughed loud, manic, a little broken around the edges, because it was just too absurd. Less than 12 hours ago, I was sitting alone, wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared, and now people were acting like I was some kind of damn voice of a generation. It wasn't the fame that hit me hardest. It wasn't even the validation, although God knows I had been starving for it. It was the realization that, maybe, I wasn't as invisible as they had made me feel. That maybe, just maybe, the story of the broken man with the cold TV dinner was something people understood because they had been there too, because behind all the perfect family photos and the polished success stories, there were a hell of a lot more empty chairs than anyone wanted to admit. As the day wore on, the messages kept pouring in. Invitations to do interviews, offers to collaborate on projects, People asking for advice. People just reaching out to say, "Me too." It was overwhelming, terrifying, exhilarating. I felt like I had been strapped to a rocket ship that I didn't know how to steer, blasting off into a future I had given up believing in. By late afternoon, I finally threw my phone down on the couch, ran my hands through my hair, and just sat there, breathing hard like I had run a marathon without moving an inch. I looked over at the kitchen table, still cluttered with the remnants of last night's disaster, and something inside me shifted. The chair wasn't empty anymore. Not really. Maybe the people who were supposed to love me had given up. Maybe the ones who should have saved me had decided I was too much trouble. But there were others now, strangers, sure, but strangers who saw something worth saving. Strangers who weren't ashamed to say, "You matter." And for the first time in a long, long time, I started to believe that maybe they were right. Maybe the chair was never the problem. Maybe it was the people who chose to walk past it without sitting down. Tomorrow, I thought, as I picked up my phone again and stared at another flood of messages, tomorrow is going to be different. I wasn't ready for just how different it was going to get. There is something almost cruel about how fast life can flip the script, how the same world that once watched you fall without lifting a finger can suddenly trip over itself to sing your praises once you start rising again. I barely slept that night. Not because of the old familiar loneliness or the bitter ache of being forgotten, but because my phone kept buzzing like it was possessed. Each new message, each new notification hammering against the walls of my tired little house with an energy I hadn't felt in years. By the time the sun clawed its way over the horizon again, I had a headache the size of Texas and a stomach twisted up in knots, but none of that mattered because something unbelievable was happening. I was not just surviving anymore, I was being noticed. Lifted, shoved into a spotlight that had long ago burned out in my dreams. Somewhere in the madness of the early morning, between answering DMs and watching the view count skyrocket past 100,000, a notification popped up that made me sit up straight, heart pounding like a drumline in my chest. It was a brand I actually recognized, one of those hip, fast-growing companies that everyone online seemed to love, and they weren't just liking my video or reposting it for clout. They were offering a real sponsorship deal. A real paycheck. Real money to make more of the same kind of authentic, messy content that I had spilled out accidentally over a microwaved Salisbury steak. I blinked at the email, read it twice, 3 times, my mind trying to wrap itself around the fact that someone actually wanted to pay me for being myself, for telling the raw, broken story I had been trying to hide for so long. Before I could even catch my breath, another message rolled in, this one from a podcaster whose voice I had heard a dozen times on long, lonely nights when I needed something to fill the silence. He was big, way bigger than I had any business even dreaming about, the kind of guy who could shift a career with a single interview, and he wanted me on his show. Not in a month. Not in a few weeks tomorrow. He wanted to strike while the iron was white hot, ride the wave of whatever the hell was happening before it cooled off, and there was a wildness in his message that matched the wild thrum of blood in my veins. I stood in the middle of my living room, the cracked coffee table littered with empty beer bottles and crumpled receipts, the curtains drawn tight against the blinding daylight, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I let myself hope without immediately stuffing it back down with fear. Something was happening, something big, and no matter how terrified I was of screwing it up, I knew I couldn't walk away from it now. The door was open. All I had to do was step through. It was almost poetic, in a sick, cosmic joke kind of way, that all of this was unfolding on the same day my family's reunion photos were still flooding social media, the same smiling faces, the same toasts to family first, the same unbearable sense of being deliberately excluded. I scrolled through a few more of their posts, heart-thudding less painfully now, more with a kind of detached amusement, because while they were busy clinking glasses and patting each other on the back, they had missed it. Missed the exact moment the black sheep they had written off became something they could no longer ignore. And maybe it made me a petty man, but I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to open their phones, sip their coffee, and choke just a little bit on the realization that I was not the failure they had so smugly cast aside. I wanted them to feel, even for a second, the sting of regret I had been living with for years. The sponsorship deal moved fast, faster than anything in my life ever had. By lunchtime, we were talking contracts and deliverables, and though the money wasn't going to make me rich overnight, it was enough to pay off some of the crushing debt, enough to put groceries in the fridge without checking my bank balance 3 times first, enough to make me feel like a man again instead of a walking apology. The podcast interview was set for the next evening, live streamed to thousands, and as I sat there going over the loose outline they sent me, it hit me just how far I had fallen from the person I used to be. I wasn't slick or polished anymore. I wasn't the golden boy who could rattle off impressive statistics or dazzle a room with big future plans. I was just a guy who had been kicked around by life and had finally decided to stop pretending it didn't hurt. Maybe that was what people were hungry for now, not more perfect success stories, but something real, something they could point to and say, yeah, me too. Maybe all the slick, photoshopped family portraits in the world couldn't compete with the raw, ugly truth that sometimes families leave you behind, and sometimes you have to build something better from the ruins. That night, as I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, my own tired face looking back at me like a stranger and a brother at the same time, I made a promise to myself. I was going to ride this wave, not for them, not even to prove them wrong anymore, but for me. For the guy who had sat alone at the table and still found the guts to hit upload anyway. As I plugged in my dying phone and let it buzz itself silly with new messages, new opportunities, new beginnings, I knew deep down that this was only the start. Tomorrow was going to be bigger. Tomorrow the world was going to hear my story not as a punchline, not as a cautionary tale, but as a real goddamn anthem. And somewhere, I hoped, Mike and Janine and every smug, smiling face at that reunion would have to hear it too. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel or a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a second chance and a voice loud enough to finally be heard. It started small, the way a storm sometimes does, with just a few harmless clouds stacking on the horizon before they open up and drench you without mercy. At first, I didn't even notice because I was too busy riding the high of opportunity, too caught up answering messages from people I actually wanted to talk to, like podcast hosts and sponsors and strangers who said my story mattered to them in ways I could hardly believe. But then my phone buzzed again, not with a brand new fan or a work offer, but with a name I hadn't seen in over a year, one I had memorized long ago during quieter times, Cousin Ricky. Hey bro, saw your video. Hilarious stuff, man. We should catch up soon. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the message like it might bite me if I touched it wrong. Ricky, the same guy who used to snicker behind my back when I lost my job, the same one who joked at Christmas about not putting all your eggs in one basket while the whole damn table laughed at my expense, now wanted to catch up. Before I could even think of a reply, another message came in, this one from Janine herself. My sister, my own flesh and blood, the woman who had once sent me that cold, slicing text about how failures don't belong at the table, now apparently found herself with a sudden surge of brotherly affection. OMG, Tom. Just saw you trending. We always knew you had it in you. So proud. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I sat there, slumped on my sagging couch with a cold cup of coffee in one hand, rereading her message until the letters blurred together. Always knew you had it in you. Proud. Like the last few years of silence and rejection had just been some kind of tough love warm-up act for this sudden parade of fake congratulations. I didn't answer. Not yet. I couldn't. It felt like trying to swallow broken glass. And they just kept coming. Aunt Carol sent a picture of herself giving a thumbs up, captioned "You're famous now." Like I was a zoo animal she had just discovered had learned a new trick. Mike, my big brother Mike, who hadn't even bothered to text me happy birthday last year, left a long voicemail saying he always believed in me and that family should stick together no matter what, which was about as rich as a chocolate cake soaked in syrup. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part of me just felt tired, bone deep, soul-weary tired, the kind that doesn't come from working too hard or sleeping too little but from realizing you were never really seen for who you are, only for what you could bring to the table. It wasn't about love. It was about pride. About appearances. About the Walkers being able to say, "Oh yeah, Tom's doing great." Always knew he would bounce back. While conveniently forgetting all the times they had turned their backs when I was bleeding out in the dirt. I tossed the phone down onto the couch and leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the buzzing messages keep pouring in. I thought about answering them, thought about writing some sharp, cutting reply that would slice right through their shiny new admiration and expose the rot underneath. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The thing was, I remembered too much. I remembered Mike standing by while Uncle Dave joked about me being the family's charity case. I remembered Janine rolling her eyes when I asked if anyone needed help setting up for Christmas. I remembered the birthdays and Thanksgivings and 4th of Julys where my seat at the table sat conspicuously empty and nobody called to ask why. And now here they were, trying to claw their way back into my life because being associated with me was suddenly something shiny again, something bragworthy. They wanted to ride the wave now that it was up, without ever acknowledging how they helped drown me when it was down. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through their messages, reading the fake warmth, the manufactured pride, the thinly veiled desperation. They wanted a piece of me, a slice of the success they had once thought impossible for someone like me. Part of me was curious, darkly curious, about what they would say if I answered. Would they apologize? Would they pretend the past never happened? Would they invite me to the next family reunion and sit me right at the head of the table this time, offering me the best cut of steak like some conquering hero? But deep down I knew. They wouldn't apologize, not really. Walkers didn't do apologies. Walkers rewrote history to suit their needs, and right now, the new story was that Tom had always been the shining hope, the comeback kid, the one they rooted for all along. The bitterness sat heavy in my chest, an old friend I couldn't shake off no matter how much success tried to sweeten the air around me. I thought about writing a single sentence back to all of them, "Where were you when I needed you?" But even that felt like too much effort, too much oxygen wasted on people who had shown me exactly what I meant to them when it counted. Instead, I turned my phone over, silencing it, muting the desperate buzz of people who only remembered you when you were worth remembering. I turned my attention back to the life I was building, the real connections forming with people who didn't care about my failures or my public wins, people who had found something human in my story and loved me for it. Maybe someday I would answer them. Maybe someday I would sit down and have the long, ugly conversations that needed to happen. But not now. Not today. Today belonged to me, to the man who sat alone at the table, looked around at all the empty seats, and decided he didn't need their damn permission to matter. Today, I built something new. And for once, I didn't look back. It did not take long for the smiles to crack, for the congratulations to sour, for the people who once claimed to love me unconditionally to start spitting their conditions like poison into my inbox. At first, it was just a few passive-aggressive nudges, little comments buried under false warmth, like Cousin Ricky's "Don't forget the people who were there before the fame," or Aunt Carol's syrupy "Hope you're still the same Tom we always knew." I ignored them, pretended not to hear the warning bells in their words, but somewhere deep down I knew it was coming. It was always going to come to this. Because when people think they own you, when they think you owe them your soul just because you share some blood and a few faded childhood memories, they do not take kindly to being ignored, even when they have spent years ignoring you first. The real blow-up started about 3 days after my podcast episode dropped, the one that racked up views faster than I could blink, the one where I spoke honestly, maybe a little too honestly, about how sometimes the people who are supposed to catch you when you fall are the first ones to step over you instead. I didn't name names. I didn't drag anyone through the mud directly. But I told the truth, and anyone who knew me, really knew me, could read between the lines. I knew when I uploaded it that there would be fallout. What I didn't expect was how fast the fallout would come banging on my door, demanding to be heard. The first real explosion came from Mike, my big brother, the one who used to yank me into headlocks and promise to beat the crap out of anyone who messed with me. The same one who later sat by silent while our family quietly disassembled whatever scraps of dignity I had left. His message was not polite, not passive-aggressive, but raw and furious. Real classy, Tom. Airing family business to strangers like that. Thought you were better than that. Guess I was wrong. I stared at the text for a long time, feeling the heat rise in my chest, a slow, burning fury that had been simmering under my skin for years, but never quite found the right words to scream out loud. Better than that. As if the silence they forced on me was the noble thing, as if pretending everything was fine while they abandoned me was some kind of virtue. And then came Janine, riding in right behind him like she always had, the golden girl, the family's favorite voice of reason, with her practiced sweetness sharpened into something far meaner. You're acting stuck up now. Fame's gotten to your head. Family is family, no matter what, Tom. We forgave you for a lot, remember that. Forgave me? The words tasted like bile. Forgave me for what? For being human? For falling down when life hit harder than I was ready for? Forgave me for embarrassing them by not fitting neatly into their little fairy tale of success and perfect holiday cards? I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because for the first time, sitting there in my kitchen with my phone buzzing in anger instead of affection, I saw the situation clearly, sharper than I ever had before. They hadn't loved me. They had loved the image of me. They loved the straight-A student, the promising young professional, the shiny trophy they could point at and say, "Look what we made." But when that image cracked, when I lost jobs, lost money, lost my marriage, and most importantly, lost the ability to pretend everything was fine, they didn't love what was left. They didn't even try. And now that I had found a way to matter again without their permission, without their approval, they wanted back in, and when I did not immediately roll out the red carpet for them, they turned on me faster than I could have ever imagined. The flood of angry messages didn't stop at just Mike and Janine. Cousin Ricky chimed in too, with a long rambling note about how family loyalty was the only thing that matters in the end, and how I needed to come back down to earth before I burned all my bridges. Uncle Dave, the same one who once made jokes about me being a charity case, sent a curt message about how nobody likes a traitor. The irony was almost too much to take. I wanted to scream at them, to send one long, blistering message detailing every moment they had abandoned me, every cold shoulder, every birthday missed, every look of barely disguised pity or disgust that told me in no uncertain terms that I no longer belonged. I wanted to list every empty seat I had stared across, every lonely night I had swallowed whole without so much as a single call or text from the people now demanding my loyalty like it was a debt I owed. But I didn't, because the truth was simpler than all of that. They had abandoned me first. Not in one dramatic, movie-worthy moment, but in 1,000 small, quiet ways that cut just as deep. They had taught me that love in our family was conditional, transactional, something you earned with perfect grades and steady jobs and smiling pictures at holiday gatherings. And when I could no longer deliver, when my life turned messy and ugly and painfully real, they had looked away. They had let me fall. Now they wanted to claim the new me without owning what they had done to the old me. I turned off my phone and sat there in the silence, letting the anger pass through me like a storm I refused to get swept away in. I had new people now, new opportunities, a new sense of self that wasn't tied to whether Mike thought I was cool or whether Janine could brag about me at her book club. They could call it stuck up if they wanted. They could call it betrayal. They could call it whatever they needed to sleep at night. I called it survival. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for surviving. Not to them. Not to anyone. There was a time when I thought success would look like a big house packed to the brim with family, loud voices echoing off the walls, kids running between tables stacked high with food, my mother smiling across the room with that proud, secret look she used to save just for me. There was a time when I believed success would mean winning my way back into their arms, repairing the invisible fractures with nothing but sheer willpower and hard work, forcing them to see me again, not as the black sheep, but as the prodigal son returned. But standing in the cramped dining room of my tiny rented house, folding chairs crammed around a mismatched wooden table, candles flickering in beer bottles because I had forgotten to buy proper holders, I realized that what I had now is better than anything I used to dream about. The people filling the seats around me that night were not the ones who shared my blood, but they were the ones who had shared something far more important, the ugly, messy, thankless parts of my story. They were the ones who had picked up the phone when I had nothing left to say but still needed someone to hear the silence. They were the ones who had shown up with frozen pizzas and cheap beer when my bank account was emptier than my fridge, the ones who stayed when my name was worth less than nothing. There was Jonah, my old roommate from college, who had watched me spiral after my divorce without ever pretending I was anything less than whole. There was Maddie, the girl who used to work the night shift with me at the gas station, who had always believed my stories about inventions and ideas even when no one else could see past the failures. There was Carl, my neighbor from 2 doors down, who never once looked at me like I was pathetic when I had to borrow his lawnmower because mine had died and I couldn't afford a new one. These were my people now. My family. The kind of family you build from the ground up when the one you were born into decides you are too much trouble to carry. We didn't have a 3-course meal that night. There was no fancy spread, no catered dishes with tiny handwritten cards describing every flavor profile. I grilled burgers out back on the rusted old barbecue pit I had found on Craigslist for $20. Maddie brought her famous potato salad. Jonah showed up with 2 cases of whatever beer was on sale, and Carl, bless his heart, brought a cherry pie that looked like it had seen better days, but tasted like a slice of heaven. There was no revenge speech, no carefully planned moment where I stood up and told the world how wrong my family had been, how they should be sorry, how they should be ashamed. None of that felt necessary anymore. The anger was still there, somewhere deep inside, but it had cooled into something quieter, something more dignified. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't even need their recognition. What I needed was this: the laughter bouncing off the cracked walls, the clink of bottles being tapped together in sloppy toasts, the low hum of stories being told and retold until they became the kind of myths that real families build their foundations on. I waited until the plates were mostly empty, until the sky outside had turned the soft, bruised blue of a summer night slipping into something slower and sweeter, and then I stood up. Not because I had planned a speech, not because I had something rehearsed and polished to say, but because my heart felt too full to sit still any longer. The room quieted naturally, the way real friends know when a moment matters without anyone having to tell them. I picked up my half-empty beer, raised it high, and for the first time in a long time, I spoke straight from the place inside me that still believed in hope. To family, I said, voice rough but steady, the kind you choose. The kind that chooses you back. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't grand. But it was true, and sometimes true is enough. They raised their bottles, not with the polite claps or forced smiles I remembered from blood family gatherings, but with real grins, the kind that crinkle up the edges of your eyes and make you feel, even for a moment, like you are exactly where you belong. I sat back down, letting the warmth of the beer and the night and the company settled deep into my bones, and for the first time in a long, long while, I realized that maybe I had been chasing the wrong kind of belonging for most of my life. Maybe family isn't about matching last names or shared childhood memories or guilt-tripped holiday cards. Maybe it is about who shows up when everything falls apart. Maybe it is about who sees you ugly and bruised and still calls you brother. Somewhere in the corner of the room, my phone buzzed again, another message flashing across the screen, probably Mike or Janine or Aunt Carol, trying one more time to wedge themselves into a story they hadn't cared enough to stay in when it got hard. I didn't even reach for it. It could wait. they could wait. Because here, in this tiny rented house with a broken AC unit and second-hand furniture, I had found something worth more than all the forced reunions and empty apologies in the world. I had found peace. And yet, even as I laughed and passed around the pie, even as the night stretched out soft and golden and kind, a tiny voice inside me wondered if maybe, someday, I would pick up that phone again. Maybe someday I would answer their messages, listen to their half-hearted apologies, try to stitch something back together from the ragged remnants they had left behind. Maybe, but not tonight. Tonight, I was exactly where I was meant to be. And for once, that was enough.